morning, everyone. Welcome to a new podcast that we're attempting. We have a working title. I think we might call it the Educational Leadership Forum. And I've got my first guest on here, Glenn Marx, Coach Glenn Marx. We welcome you, Coach Marx. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Coach Marx, just to let all of you know who he is, other than being an amazing human, he was a head basketball coach for 26 years. He was a Division I assistant both at Brown and USC and the University of Hawaii. He was and still is a skills coach both in the United States and internationally. He's visited classrooms all around the world, spoken to coaches and athletic directors, both domestically and internationally. Currently, he's a prep academy head coach and does a lot of work in that area. And he was an athletic director for 2 or 3 years. Glenn, how long was it?
Longer than that, but it felt like a long time.
They all kind of run together, don't they?
Yeah.
Glenn and I worked together at Miracosta High School. And he has a lot of background and experience, a lot of strong opinions, as you'll see in our podcast, which we welcome. And Glenn is my friend, and we worked together at Miracosta for a long time. And one thing I'll tell you about Glenn, he knows everybody. I should say everybody knows him. No matter where we go, somebody will come up and say hi to him, and it might be a Division I college coach. It might be the state commissioner of athletics. It could be all kinds of athletes and parents. Everybody knows Glenn Marx, and so we're happy to have him here, and happy that all of you watching can get to know him as well. So again, welcome, and glad you're here, Coach. How did I do? Did I introduce you okay?
Yeah, you played down a number of years. I worked as athletic director. I'm wondering why.
Because I couldn't remember how many years we worked together as athletic director and principal. So,
but time goes fast when you're having a good time. So
how many years was it? Let's get
more like 7 or 8. Yeah, it was longer.
Dang, I sold you short. Maybe I was just thinking about the last 2 to 3 years where we were working through COVID. That's a topic of another podcast, right?
That's a whole other animal right there.
No, because no one will believe it. No one will believe it. The story. We really should come back on and do that.
Right.
But today's topic has to do with the commercialization of athletics. Mm-hmm. The Tostitos Fiesta Bowl, how athletics has become completely commercialized. And it's been that way for a while. It's been that way probably 30 years where it's been hyper commercialized. But what I want to ask you about is the recent past, the effects of social media, the effects of NIL money, the effects of the portal. These are recent phenomena that are the landscape is changing as you and I are talking, right? And just what that means to athletic directors and coaches and athletic programs.
Well, it's funny. Last night I took some foreign players and coaches to UCLA to tour the campus. And then we went to the promenade, and we went to the Nike store. And in the Nike store, there's a section for Bronny James, LeBron's son, with USC uniforms. Now, I'm actually going to the SC practice today, and it's Bronny's first practice. He has a bodyguard that goes with him to all the games and practices. So here's a kid who's never played a minute of college basketball, who I think is actually the third best guard on his team, has his uniform being sold at the Nike store. And of course, he's getting a chunk of that. I wonder if USC is even getting as much of the profit as he is. So, and the other thing is that as to the why, and throwing out names because you said I know everybody. Sonny
Everybody
Vaccaro,
knows you. Everybody knows you.
because I'm infamous. That's why. Sonny Vaccaro lived in Manhattan Beach, where you've been and I live now. And Sonny, I knew him and actually was over to his house. And Sonny Vaccaro and O'Bannon, who I also know his family, started the O'Bannon lawsuit, which led to the NIL. But they were, the college people are not as worried about NIL as they are having to pay athletes. So one of the reasons why the NIL happened was because they were afraid of losing the major lawsuit and having to pay athletes. So the two of the things they acquiesced on to kind of shut them up and slow down the tide of the courts and the Congress is to allow them to make money on their image and to transfer whatever the heck they wanted.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, when we were walking by Poly Pavilion, we saw the Pyramid of Success, which is and it was in the Wooden Center also. And one of the big foundations on the bottom is the word loyalty. So number one, why do you play for a University of Oklahoma? Because they offered me the most NIL money. And what's the first thing you wonder about after half of the season? Transferring. So loyalty and purpose are things that aren't exactly there. And I've seen it on the high school level, the junior college level, and the Division I level.
So Sonny Vaccaro, for those that don't know, he was the Adidas guy, right?
Yeah, I went to Nike. He actually started with the Adidas. He moved around.
So can you say that, is it safe to say now historically that he was the beginning? He's the inception of where we're at today.
Yeah, but in fairness to Sonny, he felt that these players are being exploited, and he knew, in the movie, Air shows how he knew how much the money involved is unbelievable. I mean, I was at a prep tournament now called the Grind Session for boys basketball, and they were streamlining TV. They had the kids interviewed at halftime. You felt you were at a professional event, and these are high school players. So the commercialization, like you said, it gets back to the original question I ask is, what's the purpose of all this? What's the mission of athletics? And you had said to me, number one of the things you're doing as an athletic director is protecting and building on the brand. Well, so are they. My brand, for my image. And when you transfer, you go to a new school. So one of the reasons now I'm talking to coaches, I won't mention the universities, but there was a Southern California university that had a leading scorer. The coach had developed for 2-3 years. The kid came and says, "Coach, I love the school. I appreciate what you've done for me, but this other university is going to give me $1 million to transfer my senior year."
Wow. So that kind of leads to my next question. I have two questions that are burning a hole in my head. Now, I'm a new athletic director, and I'm trying to build something here. Well, how you and I build something could be vastly different as to how they might build something. So what do you think the keys are for a new athletic director, a new athletic program? How do we keep kids now? How do we keep them? How do we recruit them? How do we keep them? Do we just blow out our media department so that we have, an army of grad assistants with cell phones and they're going out and they're posting content? Is that what it means now? Is the media department bigger than the weights and conditioning department or the trainers?
I was thinking of doing some skill work because they changed the NCAA rules on the number of assistant coaches that can be on the court coaching. So I talked to one school, and the two primary concerns they have for Division I assistants are, number one, to help them solicit alumni to raise money for NIL, which used to go towards facilities and other things, and secondly, to keep their own players from transferring. Matter of fact, they weren't even going to live events to recruit the AAU and the high school kids because they had to fly to Detroit to visit with a family of their own player. Now, you would think when you go to that family, they would say, my son or daughter are not playing the right position. They need to get more catches for runs in football, or I want more passes thrown to my son. Oh, no. They're saying, how much money can you raise to give them next year for NIL? And the thing is, being an athletic administrator, I think it was it Villanova that hired a general manager? And the general manager, who's, by the way, a former Division I head basketball coach, is now in charge of the portal and NIL.
Okay, so now we're talking about restructuring athletic departments here.
Yeah, because one of the nice things that did occur, even on the junior, I was working with the junior college here in Southern California, and the facilities were wonderful. Well, a lot of the money you raise, you put in for the weight rooms, you put in for for a nutritionist and all these good things to develop players, and of course have players come. That money's got to go now towards NIL.
So maybe I don't understand NIL. NIL money came from sales. So if my name, image, or likeness generated funds, then I get those funds. But you're saying something different, it seems like.
Well, one of the players I train plays for University of Colorado, and he was telling me that, and they'll say, "Hey, I'll take a selfie here in front of your store, and I just want to come in and get free food all the time." You see, here's the thing, Ben. I actually, again, you say I know everybody. I actually did coach and train, and he was in my high school team, the president of the coach association for men's basketball. And Jamie sat on all these committees, and what he kept saying was, he kept asking, well, what happens if this and what happens with that? Like, for instance, I was with foreign players. I have foreign players in the United States, and they weren't able to get NIL money. I think that changed. So Jamie, all the things he asked him, they would say, well, we'll work on it. We'll work on that. They went ahead and passed the legislation to start it for fear of the O'Bannon lawsuit and this thing getting out of control and having to pay athletes. They just opened up Pandora's box and said, we'll figure it out later. Because, what control do you have? I mean, and why does your boys soccer goalie or your girls soccer gets more scholarships? Why does he not get the access to the alumni's companies and things? And by the way, you're supposed to stay out of it. That's the funny part.
What does that mean?
Well, you can't organize it and say, okay, Ben, I've got this money for you from NIL, and Glenn, I've got this money for you. It's supposed to be done outside of the athletic organization.
So who does it?
Overtly or covertly?
Who does it?
Well,
I thought it was all sanctioned now by athletic departments.
Well, I remember Raw Recruits and some of those movies that were out a minute ago about how Nick Nolte had to go along with his major donors to illegally give money into the table to players like Reggie Bush out here at USC, and the house and the mortgage and the car and everything else you get, right? Well, those same monies that the oil man in Oklahoma driving the red convertible Cadillac with a recruit in his car and those kinds of movies,
right?
Now it's legal. But you can't have a meeting and so it's done kind of not overtly, covertly, and
it seems to me like if it's truly based on exposure, social media exposure, sales, and sales don't necessarily have to be in the venue, right? They can be online or whatever.
That was the as so often that was the original intent.
So that money goes where? If Bronny sells tonight at the game, 500 jerseys. Obviously, the athletic shop there at the facility is taking in the money.
Well, no, actually, I'm not aware of that. This was at the Nike store in the Promenade. So I don't think, again, I haven't been at that level. And when I asked the same questions you're asking to the person who was sitting on the actual committee, he said, well, that's being discussed. They opened up, it reminds me a lot of, okay.
Don't say it. Don't say it. Don't say it.
Okay. I won't say it. I'll say something else.
Don't say his name.
We have a pandemic right now. And given the pandemic, here are rules about wearing masks when you play games. There was no textbook for that. You had no class that you train people what to do. Okay, let's talk about what to do when we have a COVID pandemic. Similarly, who knew that you're going to say that a kid who hasn't even played a minute can have his uniform that says USC on it with his number?
So I get the Nike store thing, right? The Nike store, they have an obligation to put money into Bronny James's pocket for what they're selling. I don't know how that works. I guess Bronny James has a lawyer, accountant, and a agent, but
right.
But what about what the school sells? Because my guy, right, Johnny Football.
Right.
That's the whole controversy around him, was that the university made billions, right? Go Aggies. The university made billions, but none of that went into Johnny Football's pocket. And that started him on his path, right, of what he did. And so I don't know what happens at the venue or the USC online sales. How do those Bronny James jerseys?
The first thing I
apologize to Bronny, but that he's like, isn't he number one on NIL projections right now?
You know what's funny? Guess what USC has for football? I mean, I've seen TVs on commercials on television with Williams, the quarterback at USC, in it.
Oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
So they have
Dr. Pepper commercial.
Yeah. Matter of fact, we're not even talking about Collier. Collier is the number one projected draft pick in the NBA next year, and guess where he plays? USC. So they have the maybe number one football and the number one basketball. So the first thing I thought of, thinking right along your lines, which is scary that I'm thinking right along your lines, but the first it's not the first time. The first thing I thought of when I saw that was USC. Now it's very common for universities to make a whole lot of money, as you're saying, selling gear. Like, you could go to some store in Oklahoma and buy some Oklahoma football and Texas football, right? And Texas football now is huge because they're playing it. So
flash in the pan.
Yeah, but I'm thinking that USC athletics has made a ton of money by having Williams play football for them and having Bronny James and Collier on the basketball team.
Yeah. Well, my other question was, if now it's name, image, likeness, social media presence, I mean, this is all online and virtual.
Yeah.
Why can't, I'm just going to pull a random university out of my head. Why can't Northern Arizona University put a lot of resources into a athletic media department so that these kids get maximum exposure, they get maximum potential for NIL money, and just build a program tomorrow out of the portal?
Yeah, well, they do. I mean, it's amazing now. But the problem is with a portal that it's outrageous that these players, because I had players on a portal 2 years ago. I was very active in that because I had a player transferring. He ended up staying at the university that he was going to leave from. But so I got involved in that at the mid and lower levels, where he was involved. It was a Patriot League school. And they're not throwing the monies out at kids, which is why players are the best player at a Patriot League school. You train them and coach them and cry when their mother's dying, go to the funeral and do all the things you do for your kids you care about. The university loves this kid, but he goes into your office and says, well, look, I got to go because now this high major is offering me. I mean, did you see the comment in the paper from, I think it was in Nebraska, head coach talking about how much it costs to get a transfer quarterback?
No.
Like 1.5 and 2 million and $800,000.
But that's not, is that NIL money?
Yeah,
How?
because you have, I mean, how much endowment? Look, when I was at an Ivy League school, the coach comes in and tells us that we're in a little bit of trouble because we're about to be out of our recruiting budget and it's October. And I remember I'm a neophyte rookie. Oh my God! I mean, we screwed up. We can't go on any recruiting visits. He says, so now we'll tap into our endowment money. When I was at Stanford, they have a building at Stanford with 3 floors for the Alumni Association.
But that recruit has not generated any name, image, or likeness revenue. So how do you, is it in advance? Is it like a record deal? Is it
If
like
I get offered a movie contract, I suppose, there might be an advance payment, but I know I have a contract which says during the course of this next year, I'm making this amount of money, right?
So is that now part of your scouting report? He can dribble with both hands. He can go right and left. He puts the correct foot forward on his jump shot. He uh he, he can play both ways. He's got this much of a vertical. He's got this type of skills, and we see his potential for NIL to be at 1.75 million.
Well, I mean, it's marketability, isn't it? And one of the things I would teach my son or daughter is not a bad thing, which is to have good social media skills and speak well and be friendly with the alumni. So maybe you'll get more NIL money. Now, as we talk about all this, we also have to throw in the other thing, which is disgraceful, and that's the transfer portal.
Okay.
And of course, we are talking about it because one of the reasons I am going to transfer is I want more money.
Okay.
And to me, what it's done is there are a bunch of rentals, and of course, like one person told me, well, what do the coaches do? I mean, they were talking about dragging away the Colorado coach after less than one season to get an NFL job or something of that nature. So you bring in a coach, you give them support and everything else. They recruit all these kids and promise their mother, I'll be their surrogate father, or mother, surrogate mother for girls coaches, and then you up and leave. So but what it does is, as an athletic director, you're trying to build continuity, develop players, the brand. I wrote some of the things down. Teach them how to act and be role models for the university, and then maybe they can make a lot of money. Somebody asked me, who pays for this grind session, this national level prep? And you know what the answer was when I asked the guy who runs it? Oh, some of the players in the NBA are doing it. You see, they have contracts in the NBA where they're supposed to give some of the money back. It's a Nike contract or whatever, right? So if they're going to give some money back, they'll give $50,000 to the grind session because that's where they played and that's where they got famous. There's so much money out there.
Wow. Well, again, commercialization, right?
Right.
There's a ton of money out there. So with all that money and all that dynamic and all these athletes who are now starting to look at why they're playing in a different light, first talk for a second directly to ADs.
Yeah.
Give ADs right now 1, 2, 3, 5 pieces of advice on how they should be building their athletic programs right now.
Well, here's the biggest problem. This kid from Europe was here, and I asked him what the biggest thing he's noticed being here. And he said, this is an 18-year-old kid, the disparity from wealthy to poor, which he, walking around the streets of Munich and Europe, and he's from Croatia, he doesn't see that. He's like, after 10 days, he saw that in the United States. Well, guess what, coach or athletic director? The goalie on the water polo team doesn't have every alumni wanting them to stop by the store to give them money. Your quarterback does on the men's team. So here's the problem: disparity. You have disparity within your own athletic department of the wealthy players, and even on the team itself. The defensive cornerback doesn't have quite the same cachet as the star running back does. So you have people walking around having bodyguards and having their uniforms sold. And then you have some other kid who busts their butt for University of Oregon, or actually everybody's gonna make money at the big schools, but for the Northern Arizona, who has to worry about how they're going to get money back to their grandmother who's not doing too well right now. So you have to spare your own school.
So your first thing you would say to ADs then is you have to figure out how to mitigate the disparities.
Oh, I don't think first of all, you can't overtly do anything about it, because you can't say to alumni, look, I'm not going to let you give our quarterback all this money if you don't give our softball catcher all this money.
Why not?
Well, do it.
Why can't you say that?
Then you won't get very good quarterbacks.
Okay. All right. What else? What else would you say to ADs? They're sitting there in their office. They know this is happening. What change do I need to make right now?
Well, I have a naive answer to that. I had told one of the schools that I think one of the things people are missing is how you treat these athletes. How do they feel being there? That they're not going to want to leave, and that a skilled person like myself, who will meet them in the gym or on the softball field before practice and work with them, builds the loyalty concept, and there's a feeling of continuity there. So I know this is naive and maybe it's old-fashioned, but if you treat them right and develop them, and they feel that they're going to be better athletes and better people because of what you're doing, but you see what happens there is you have to end up, over treating the ones that are the star athletes so they don't leave, and they end up leaving anyway, by the way, unless you can get them more money, and you don't treat everybody as well. So I would say to have kind of a culture at the university of acceptance and importance for every athlete. And I know you got to raise money and NIL and all that and stuff like that, and all the social media. So somebody's grandmother sees something online about how his daughter did well in softball. So stay there. They promote you. Secondly, I think you've got to really go out in the community, find out what the kid's major is going to be, and convince, hopefully, one of the stable parents that you'll get a good job in Flagstaff. You're set for life because the loyalty you've had in being in a program. When Oscar da Silva was being encouraged to leave Stanford early, and then he was encouraged to do what all these athletes are doing now, which is not play in the conference tournaments and the bowl games. That's one of my favorite things. Yeah. Here he's going to this big bowl game and conference tournament. No, my agent-to-be tells me I might get hurt and stay home. That's loyalty. So he told me that, and he had a little stress fracture, and he said, I'm being told by the people overseas and my prospective agent. I said, Oscar, I said, the university has put you in this kind of position. You owe it to your teammates of the university to with not hurting yourself, to play in these games and do it the right way. When he got done and he played, because he's Oscar, and I did give him that advice, that one of the top alumni knew he played kind of hurt and kind of was sophisticated and knew that he might not have played. And he announced a $100,000 endowment to men's athletics in Oscar's name because of what he stood for his loyalty. So these are things you got to encourage as an athletic director, is to encourage the community to embrace these people and as a future job, and live in the community and be part of it, to work against the tide that we're talking about.
I think so. Your first point was understand and do your best to mitigate the disparities, and then build a brand around your program. If you come here, this is our plan for you, which is what we've always been doing. But now you have to be aware of the pull. There's a pull out there, right? The athlete is going to have a constant pull on them. And how do you become aware of that pull? How do you respond to it? You've got an athlete, he hits a big three in a game. Maybe you're Northern Arizona University, you play a a preseason game against Duke, a kid hits a big three, and now everyone's coming after him. And now, hey, look, we didn't see you on the radar as a recruit. We see you now. You can come to, blue chip university, and we can do this much more for you here. That athletic director has to be right there. When that kid hits that big three, that athletic director better be in the locker room and say, hey, look, your life is about to change, but we want to keep you here. So let's sit down and map that out, because now your commercialized level as a player has gone from here to here because of that shot, and you knocked off Duke.
Yeah.
So you have to have a plan. I think, if listening to you, you have to have a plan as an AD on how to respond to a player's increased commercial level.
Yes.
Wow. We weren't talking about this 25 years ago. We weren't talking about this 5 years ago.
Right.
I think it's incredible. Okay, now to coaches. I saw an interview with Andre Iguodala just recently, like in the last week or so. And he was talking about a team he was on late in his career, and he was making the league minimum late in his career. And they got in a playoff game, and a player on the other team was killing him. And the coach turned to him and said, Andre, you got to cover the guy. You got to bail us out of this situation. So now Iguodala is talking to his interviewers, and he goes, my first thought was, I'm making the least amount of money of these 12 guys, and you want me to bail you out. The 3 guys to my left are all making, incrementally more than I am, but somehow they can't cover the guy. And he said it affected his mentality. Like, you want me to save the organization in this moment, but the organization is not willing to get behind me.
Yeah.
That's in a player's head. Now that's Andre Iguodala at the pro level. Talk to coaches right now. Talk to coaches. You're the coach. You've got your roster set, or you're trying to set your roster. So now, Coach Marx, advise the coaches.
Well, I was listening to you talk and thinking about this, that when I did some of the scouting for the NBA team, one of the reasons the general manager asked me to do this was not to tell them how high they jump and how fast they run, how many points they get, that type of thing. They have the analytics to do that. They wanted me to find out the fiber of the person, just like the movie Draft Day. Because I know all the AAU coaches, high school coaches, and I know the assistants in college. I can say, look, what kind of a guy is this? Is he going to say, I'm not going to go out and guard that best player because you didn't get me as much NAL money as somebody else? What's he going to do? And when I sat next to one person who was a veteran NBA scout, and he said, look, you create your own problems. Don't draft a guy that's a quarterback and not invite any of his teammates to his 21st birthday, just like in the movie Draft Day. Draft the guy like your quarterback you already have that the players would die for, would go over there and help him fix his house after the storm. And so when you're recruiting these kids who play for these AAU teams, whose mother wants to know how much money, it's kind of like a friend of mine years ago when he interviewed with the guy, Jerry Tarkanian, when Jerry asked him, what's your first question? He said, how much money can I make after 1 year? Jerry didn't hire him. Because if your number one concern is how much money am I going to pay you, not working conditions, what responsibility can you have, this type of thing, then, and by the way, I'm going to pay you pretty good money anyway, I'm not going to hire you. So if you're recruiting these kids and you're recruiting their parents who are looking for getting rich quicker, then you're walking into the buzzsaw that you're walking into.
You got to really think that through, right? Because once you open that door, the other 11 are going to see that. You go get that kid, you got 12 kids, 11 of them would run through a wall for you. And then you go, man, this kid's out there. He can he'll transform our program. He's so good. He wants to come here. We're going to have to show fine, but what about the other 11 kids?
Yeah. And Northern Arizona probably wouldn't mind it if alumni all of a sudden want to donate a lot more money and give them an NAL because you got that star kid, who, by the way, cares about how much money you're going to pay him to play at that school. It's a catch-22.
So
and then
the coach really has to understand the AD's mindset, right? If the AD is looking to build a huge NIL endowment, the coach needs to know that, because if the coach is just going out and getting, grinders to, no pun intended, they're going out getting kids who are run through a brick wall kids. They just want to go out and play and compete and win. They're not thinking about all this other stuff. If it comes, it comes. If that's the kind of players the coach is recruiting, but the AD wants to go in the portal, raise a bunch of NIL money, and get high profile, high commercialized kids, boy, that coach needs to know that, right?
Yeah, but you see, who are you going to hire, athletic director? I mean, now probably one of the first things that coach wants to know, if you want to hire him, besides the salary they're going to make as a head coach, is, what kind of a program do we have here for NIL? That's why, I mean, general manager, Villanova hired this Division I head coach to be the general manager, to go to those wine auctions, so to speak, as you did when you were principal, and to make people want. I said to you, Ben, and the listeners will get a kick out of this, that we needed to enhance the. Remember, if we want to keep a Ramsey, we've got to get some employers in the community to hire our coaches. And by the way,
and we did.
There were baseball players in Orange County that transferred high schools because they had more NIL money at this other high school.
Well, it's a big part of what's happening right now. And I think what you and I have discovered here is there are more questions than answers.
Oh, yeah.
And as the universities are trying to figure it out, so are ADs, so are coaches, so are you and I, so are educators. And the people watching this podcast, hopefully we've sparked something in them. Who was it? President Clinton was interviewed one time, and he said, by the end of my time in the White House, I still didn't have all the answers, but we were asking all the right questions. Yeah. And so I think that's where we're at with this. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think another quote to use politicians, presidents, is a lot of decisions that you make with things like this, which go against the original intent and purpose of what you're trying to do in athletics, you have to make some bad choices. So your choices are between bad and the worst.
Yeah.
And and again, what does that alumni want? Do they want athletes that are going to dive on the court and act right and go to the children's hospital and be the first kid that comes into the college classroom and asks questions? Or do they want somebody who their grandkid says, let's go watch Oklahoma because so-and-so is the quarterback? It's you have to, and also I would have another comment here about be part of the legislative process. That was one thing I was big on, as you know, was to go to those CIF state meetings and to know the president of the state association, because and Jamie was on the committee. Yeah. And he was raising his hand saying, what about foreign players? And of course, not everybody in your podcast is going to be a major college Division I head athletic director. So the problems they're going to have at a lower level as far as commercialization school won't be the same, but you'll lose those kids you're developing to those kinds of schools. So it still comes up. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And when you go to those meetings, don't just sit there and accept a comment like, I'm sorry you feel that way.
Right. Well, like we've said before, athletic directors have to have a command of the room.
Yeah.
And the other problem about this, which caps it off, is, it used to be that car dealer would say, Coach, You got to run the football more and get a ball to that running back that I helped you get by giving him all that money. And that was kind of in the movies, and you saw that. But now it's happening again. They want to know why you didn't play zone, or why you're not trying to steal more bases. And you can't tell them to get the heck out of here, because they're basically, you got that running back because of that. So you better hand it off to the guy.
I don't think Norman Dale could coach today. He
Well,
couldn't even get through the barbershop,
Well, Jamie said to me, who was the president of Coach Association, is head coach in a major university. He said to me, he says, I kind of get a kick out of this because I have to adapt or die.
Yeah.
I have to, adjust. And I guess there's more revenue to be made. Like I said, now I'm seeing all this USC stuff because they have Williams and they have Bronny James. So you're going to buy that USC jersey because they have that great player on it. So you also have to, you said it also, be able to teach your athletes and your university and your coaches how to promote, how to use social media, and to get, because supply and demand from an NIL standpoint is how you're selling your image, as an athlete and as a team. So your coaches have to be good at it, and if you have a son or daughter that's, let's say, a tennis player or a golfer or something like that, guess what? At a young age, they have to learn how to be self-promoting, because you could probably give an example of a golfer or a tennis player who is very popular out there and makes a lot of money, like Lefty. About Lefty, when I went to watch golf, back in the day, and Mickelson made a lot of money because of his demeanor and his personality.
I'm gonna set your hair on fire and tell you about a 12-year-old tennis player who gets free apparel.
Yeah.
Because if they like the apparel and start wearing that apparel, there's a future endorsement deal there. And so, at a lot of these tennis academies, there's a lot of free shoes, free shorts, free shirts, rackets, wraps, strings, the whole thing. And, once you get to a certain point, then, there's an endorsement deal. And when a 12-year-old already has a listing in the NC2A clearinghouse, I don't know what we're doing.
Well, Ben, this is a key point here. When at our school, and this is true for you and I, that if a kid acted a certain way, the kid that we had that played multi-sports was a jerk, yelling at his teammates. Remember him?
Yep.
And I cornered him and sat him down and said, "You're not going to be wearing one of our uniforms if you act that way." I called him off a, was it lacrosse or soccer practice?
It was
remember?
lacrosse. It was lacrosse.
I called him off to the sideline and I said, "You're not going to even represent this." What do you mean? I said, "You're acting like a jerk. You're not going to wear our uniform." All right. Well, how does somebody listening to this podcast walk up to an athlete and say that you are not going to act that way? And they're going to say, "Do you know how much money I make a year? This is what you make a year?" Is anybody buying a Ben Dale uniform at a Nike store and you're the athletic director? They're buying my stuff. So leave me alone. I'm acting fine. Matter of fact, I'm going to keep acting this way because it seems to me that that Nike store likes the way I act. It's amazing.
In my head, I want that to have played out between that athlete and you.
Well, I mean,
we would have said, and Coach Marx was athletic director for 7 years instead of 8.
Yeah, no, it's, but I think in a way you could argue that it's helping this athlete because they want to go up to the people at the Christmas party and treat the clients well.
Yeah.
So a company and I will make more money. And if I'm a star salesman, it seems to me that I get commission and a percentage of profit. So the company makes money and I make money. So
I see contracts coming.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Contracts are coming. Look, okay, you want to come here, you got to sign a 2-year deal with us.
Yeah.
I see that if that isn't happening already, it's coming. But anyway, hey, Coach, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. We've brought up a lot of good points. We're asking a lot of good questions, and hopefully those watching it are doing the same and saying, okay, that's something I need to think about. So appreciate it, Coach. And what are you doing today?
Well, today I'm supposed to go over to the USC practice and then stop by high school I'm working some of the players out with and do my little cardio, because when you get older, you got to do that every day.
Well, you look good for 45. So
Well, yeah, you're doing the same thing for the number of years I'm alive, the number of years I was athletic director. I like that. That's it.
you've been an AD since you were 12.
Yeah.
All right, Coach. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Nice talking to you.